happening with the talk of us losing our AAA rating, because Dr. Pachinik has also done a lot of work in those areas. The war drums being beaten to go after Pakistan now. That's becoming more and more clear. What's happening in Libya. I mean, I want to pick his brain on a lot of subjects, but before we go any further, I called Dr. Pachinik yesterday to get him back on. I gave him a few days rest after he graciously joined us Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of last week, because the listeners are just demanding it, and it's just amazing insight, obviously. But I preface it with Dr. Pachinik saying, have you seen this MSNBC article? And I said, no. Well, he emailed it to me, because there have literally been thousands of blogs, hundreds of foreign and domestic newspapers, you name it, that have reported on the Pachinik interviews here on air. And they've had to admit, well, Madeleine Albright did concur with him a year after he first said it on Alex Jones in 2002 in April, that, yes, they had him frozen, were planning to roll him out at a politically expedient time. I also have two White House sources told me the same thing. Then Teresa Heinz Kerry came out. Then Walter Cronkite, the late Walter Cronkite, came out. Those are all on record, and we break it down in our new video, Proof Bin Laden Death, Another Government Lie. Please get that out to everybody, because on this lie, they're trying to boost his approval ratings, get the domestic police state rollout, the internal checkpoints, the internal passports, the local police openly federalized. That's in CBS News today, to do the grope downs and the slave training and the body scanners at bus stations, train stations, highway checkpoints, the new cybersecurity takeover of all internet devices. The standardization is already in all the cell phones with the new kill code chip, where the president has now announced he will break in, cut off your phone conversations. Smartphones, you're going to get video and text. Regular phones, just text, with government mandatory messages, 9,000 telescreens at town squares, Mall of America, all Walmart locations now getting them. Out of 800, over 400 already have them, saying, don't trust your neighbors, right out of 1984. So their entire agenda is based on re-invoking the lie of the false flag of 9/11. And you notice after the attack, and then now after the supposed killing of bin Laden, we're being told we've got to now give up our rights. There's going to be more attacks. It's going to be worse. There's nukes buried. KSM Under Torture says, if bin Laden's killed, they're going to nuke us. That came out 2 weeks before. They're really hyping it to get a new false flag ready, to really drop the hammer on this soft martial law grid they've put in, that they're now starting to warm up and move to the front burner. So Dr. Pachinik said, have you seen this? And I said, no. And I had forgotten all this information. But they did a hit piece on Dr. Pachinik, New Life for an Old Rumor, Was bin Laden a Marfanoid? And they go and they talk to the top doctor, Richard Devereaux. They go and talk, who was trained at the same facility that Dr. Pachinik was. Well, he's Harvard and MIT. Devereaux, the Cornell Medical Center, a New York Presbyterian expert who treats patients with Marfan syndrome, said he doesn't want to talk about it, but yes, bin Laden is a Marfanoid, or someone who has this syndrome, which is very debilitating. And at the point that bin Laden was on his deathbed, CBS News confirmed, in Dubai at the American hospital, being visited by the CIA, I guess getting his agreement to play the part from the grave of this boogeyman to now be resurrected again and then killed again. But he confirmed that, yes, he clearly has this syndrome. And that's our article that we have now up on prisonplanet.com and Infowars.com. Top doctor confirms bin Laden had Marfan syndrome. On top of it, he had total failure of the kidneys. That was on record. On the outside that you live maybe 5-6 years with, and this other degenerative disease. And there he is in this squalid cesspit that they told us was a palace, and they confirm no dialysis equipment. Dr. Steve Pachinik, that's a 5-minute intro. I just wanted to preface everything. What does this signify, that they've tried to demonize you so much? As you told me yesterday, the intelligence community creates names like deathers, birthers. just like conspiracy theorists, to put a label on things. Now they have deatherism within hours of my report a week and a half ago on Sunday evening. This has all the telltale signs. What does it signify, even in their own hit piece, having to admit that he had a terminal disease and couldn't be alive today?
Well, what happens in the intelligence community, and you and I expected it, and I'm sure your audience does. Number one, you know, the intelligence community always assumes that we, the American people, are dumber than they are, and the politicians in the White House who really, now I see Tom Donilon and Ben Rhodes, are really second-quality politicians who come out of lobbying and local politics in New York. So they have no understanding of you have or the American public. And what happens in the intelligence community, it's kind of a kabuki. Once somebody like me who's been in national security, and again, I'm not a whistleblower, I don't have a top secret clearance, you came forth and your people came forth, and I said, look, this is a lie. The lie doesn't work. Enough of this nonsense and trying to manipulate the American public for the benefit of the political expediency of this president and the former president and the former president, Bush Jr. or Clinton. The issue is very simply, by saying that we are conspirators, number one, they try to delegitimize by putting in a category. That doesn't work anymore. Whether we're conspirators or we're lifers, there was a new term called lifers and then deathers. And when I said to myself, my God, these boys are really reaching, and they're reaching out in desperation, because every time you try to niche our public, the Alex Jones public or the American public or you, Alex, or me, by saying I'm a conspirator, it really doesn't work. And what happens is they expose themselves. As I told you on the first show weeks ago, they're putting themselves out, and I watch where they're shooting, and I know exactly how they're going to come back. And I told you they're going to come back and call us kooky, crazy, alleged conspirator, as you saw in that article, MSNBC. Well, reporters don't have the intelligence or the ability to really spend time on these issues. Most of them are young kids, or most of them are using blogs, and most of them are just picking up, and they're just literally receptacles through which, you know, intelligence...
Well, Doc, I want to stop you and back you up on that. These Atlantic Monthly articles, the MSNBC, the Forbes, there are spelling errors, name errors. They put in Forbes that you had said that that the Obama killing wasn't real when it was Bin Laden killing, and they're getting rid of all the real journalists and hiring mindless yes men, and this is drivel that you would expect an eighth grade school newspaper to be putting out.
I agree with you, Alex. Really what it is it's nothing to do with us. Quite frankly, I'm very proud to be on your show, and I'm proud that our American public is forcing the illiteracy of the media, the mainstream media, to come out with the most absurd comments, poorly written. You and I know they're extremely poorly written, and they're talking about issues now about military dogs that are involved in Afghanistan. Well, you know, if you have nothing else to talk about, while Bahrain is falling, Syria is falling, people are being killed in the thousands, and you really don't know how to analyze this, and you don't know what to say, you have really second-rate writers and second-rate...
Well, that's cheap psychological warfare.
That reflects our culture, by the way. These are the McDonald brains of our, you know, immediate mind. This is a 21st century counterpart to the immediate response, where they're totally not qualified to write. They really don't know English. They are not trained in journalism as the other journalists were 20, 30 years ago, where they were investigative. Even Seymour Hersh, who I don't agree with, or you know, some of the famous reporters who spent time and sacrificed their life. However, there are people on the ground, on TV, who sacrificed their lives in Egypt and in Syria. They're trying to get in different parts of the world. But that's not what you're reading. What you're reading is about little individuals who really don't know English, who've been hired from college at the cheapest, lowest level. They write in little spurts like Facebook, and they really have no idea of what they're talking about.
You're right, Dr. Pachenik. Let's come back, though, and get into the evidence of this Bin Laden story being a joke. Former Black Op mastermind, spy master, Dr. Steve Pachenik, wrote the book for the State Department on psychological warfare. You know, I was reading Goebbels more than a decade ago, Doctor, And he was talking when Germany was being bombed. It was 1944. They were really losing. And Goebbels said, we got to change our propaganda. The Germans will do whatever we tell them, but this stuff is too ridiculous. It was almost like Baghdad Bob out there saying the Americans are nowhere near Baghdad, and you see explosions a mile behind him and U.S. helicopters flying behind him. The Germans were saying, there's no problem, we're not being bombed. And Goebbels said, look, we've got to get more reality-based. And I think the ham-fisted psyops that these criminals are running are becoming so cartoonish that they may be fooling some of the dumber segments, but most people I know in the polls I've seen, people are not buying it. Dumping the body in the sea, all of this. And I want you to comment on their ham-fisted tactics, Doctor. But before you do that, let's get into MSNBC trying to demonize you, but then going to experts who they read in Salon and others in 2001, 2002, and other publications. MSNBC called Dr. Richard Devereaux and others, and he said, I'm not going to talk about it. He said, I don't want to continue to get calls about this. But he said, yes, he is a marfanoid. He has the disorder. He had it. He had it back then. There's no doubt. And they say, so that confirms what Pachinik has to say, but still they make fun of you and myself. I mean, explaining for people, this is 10 years ago. He's on record at a hospital almost dead. Now, you saw him before that when you were working with him in the 80s. Met him once, and you said he looked ill then. Doctor, you're a medical doctor, have 2 medical degrees.
Right.
I mean, I was looking you up. You write some of the most prestigious medical reports in the country, co-authored them that have won national awards just recently. Here you are saying he's got this. The media goes out to demonize you and then talks to the top expert on this disease. They admit that. Top doctor confirms bin Laden had Marfan syndrome. They admit you can't live very long with this. Plus, he had total kidney failure. You can't live more than 6 years with that on average. But we're to believe he's in a squalid cesspit with no dialysis equipment. Can you walk through this fairy tale, Doctor?
Yeah. What happens is you invoked Goering. Let me invoke a man in 1945, a German senior official next to Goering, who was asked the following question by 3 American judges. He was asked, how did you mobilize 35 million people to go to war? His response was, it's very simple. Whether you're a democracy, whether you're communism, or whether you're Nazi nationalism, it's very simple. What you do is you create an attack, a false flag attack. Then you say whoever attacked us is the enemy, and whoever's with us against the enemy is a patriot. Well, that's what happened in 9/11, and the man who was asked that question was Goering, the head of the Air Force. He subsequently committed suicide, and that was in front of the commission and our prosecutors in the Nuremberg trial. So the technique is an old technique of trying to demonize and create we're the patriots in the United States, and anybody against them are enemies.